The unexpected turn. Martha always believed in God. She had spent her life trusting Him, praying in silence, and finding peace in His words. But there was always something that troubled her, a pain buried deep inside her heart. She had seen injustice, felt the weight of racial discrimination, and carried the wounds of a world that often judged people by the color of their skin rather than the content of their hearts. She never questioned God, but sometimes she wondered, did He see? Did He understand? And most importantly, did He care? That evening, Martha was on her way home from work. The air was crisp, and the sun was setting in shades of gold and orange. She clutched her coat tightly around her as she walked down the busy street, passing by strangers who barely noticed her presence. The world felt distant, almost unreal, as if she were just moving through it, unseen and unheard. Then, suddenly, everything changed. Martha felt a sharp pain in her chest. It was sudden, like a bolt of lightning striking through her body. Her vision blurred, her breath became shallow, and the world around her began to spin. She reached out, trying to grab onto something, anything. But there was nothing. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the cold pavement. People gathered around. She could hear their voices, but they sounded far away, like echoes in a tunnel. Someone shouted for help. A woman kneeled beside her, touching her shoulder, asking if she was okay. But Martha couldn't answer. Her heartbeat slowed. The world around her faded, like ink dissolving in water. Then everything went black. Martha opened her eyes, but she was no longer on the street. She was standing, or maybe floating, in complete darkness. The silence was deafening, thick like a heavy fog. She looked down at her hands, at her body, but something felt off. She was here, but she wasn't. Then she saw it. Her own body. It was lying on the street, surrounded by strangers. She saw the paramedics rushing in, pressing their hands against her chest, trying to bring her back. But she wasn't there anymore. A terrifying realization hit her. She was dead. Panic surged through her. She wasn't ready. She had so much left to do, so many things left unsaid. But before she could think, before she could scream, a light appeared. It was the brightest, purest light she had ever seen, glowing like a golden sun. It wasn't just light. It was warmth, peace, love. Then a voice called her name. Martha. She turned, and her breath caught in her throat. It was him. She knew instantly who he was. There was no need for an introduction. His presence filled the space with overwhelming love and peace. It was Jesus. He stood before her, radiant and powerful, yet so gentle. His eyes were full of understanding, as if he had seen every pain, every struggle, every moment of sorrow she had ever endured. Martha fell to her knees. I don't understand," she whispered. "Am I dead?" Jesus didn't answer right away. He simply looked at her, his expression calm but serious. "You need to see what I see," he said finally. Before Martha could ask what he meant, Jesus reached out his hand. The moment his fingers touched her forehead, a vision flashed before her eyes. She gasped. Suddenly, she wasn't in the darkness anymore. She was somewhere else, somewhere beyond this world. She was floating above a city she didn't recognize. People walked below her, going about their lives. But something was different. It was as if she could see not just their faces, but their souls. She saw their pain, their fears, their anger. She saw how they judged each other, how they carried invisible burdens. Then, something even stranger happened. She saw herself. She saw her past, her childhood, the moments when she had felt invisible, when she had been treated differently because of the color of her skin. She saw the moments when she had cried out to God, asking Him why. Her heart ached. The pain was still there, buried deep. Then Jesus spoke again. "You have carried this pain for so long, Martha, but you need to understand something." She turned to him, eyes filled with questions. "What do I need to understand?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jesus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he raised his hand. And suddenly, everything changed. The vision around her shattered like glass. The city faded away. The darkness returned. Martha gasped as she felt herself being pulled, dragged toward something unseen. Her heart pounded. "What's happening?" she cried. Jesus' voice echoed around her, calm but firm. "You must see what comes next." Then, everything went black. A truth beyond this world. Martha's breath caught in her throat. She felt herself falling, not down, not up, but into something beyond. The world around her shifted like mist, swirling in colors she had never seen before. A strange weightlessness surrounded her, and for a moment, she felt as if she was floating between two worlds. Then, light. Brighter than before, warmer, yet strangely unfamiliar. It wasn't the same golden glow of heaven, but a place in between. A place not of earth, not of heaven, but of truth. Martha blinked and looked around. What she saw made her gasp. She was standing in a vast, endless field. The sky above her wasn't blue. It was a shimmering silver, like liquid light. There was no sun, no moon, yet everything was illuminated in a soft, glowing radiance. A gentle wind brushed against her face, carrying whispers she couldn't quite understand. Then she saw them. People, thousands of them, standing side by side, yet not looking at each other. Some were black, some white, some of every race she had ever known. Their faces were neutral, their eyes distant, as if they were waiting for something, or someone. Martha turned to Jesus, who stood beside her, watching the scene unfold. His expression was calm but serious. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "This is the place of understanding," Jesus said, "the place where the truth of the soul is revealed." Martha's heart pounded. She wasn't sure she understood. Jesus lifted his hand, and suddenly, she saw it. A vision unfolded before her. At first, it looked like ordinary life. People living, walking, talking. But then, as she watched, something horrifying became clear. She saw people separating themselves, not by words, not even by actions, but by something unseen. It was fear. She saw white people looking at black people with suspicion. She saw black people looking at white people with pain and distrust. She saw how generations of anger, misunderstanding, and division had created invisible walls between souls, walls that were never meant to exist. Martha felt a lump in her throat. This was the world she knew. She turned to Jesus, tears brimming in her eyes. "Why are you showing me this?" Jesus' voice was gentle, but firm. "Because you have carried this pain in your heart, and because the world needs to understand." Martha shook her head. "But why is it like this? Why do people see color before they see hearts?" Jesus looked at her, and in his eyes, she saw all the love of the universe. "Because they have forgotten," he said simply. "Forgotten what?" Martha whispered. Jesus stepped forward, and as he did, the vision changed. Martha gasped. Now she saw people in heaven, and there was no color, not in the way earth saw it. The souls glowed, not black, not white, not brown, but in light. Some shined golden, some blue, some deep violet, but they were all one. No one was higher, no one was lower, no race, no division, only love. Martha's knees buckled, and she fell to the ground. I don't understand," she whispered. Jesus kneeled beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "On earth, humans see with their eyes," he said. "In heaven, we see with our hearts." Martha sobbed. She had spent her whole life feeling the pain of separation. She had believed it was them versus us, that racial struggles were one-sided, that the world would never change. But now, she saw the truth. Both sides had wounds, both carried pain, and the biggest tragedy was, they had forgotten that they were never meant to be divided. Martha looked up at Jesus, her heart pounding. "Then what am I supposed to do? What do you want from me?" Jesus stood and stretched out his hand. "You must go back." Martha's breath caught. "Back? You must tell them what you've seen." Panic flooded her. "No, they won't listen to me. They'll say I made it up." Jesus smiled gently. "Some will, but others will hear, and they will remember." Martha shook her head. "I'm not ready. I don't know how." Before she could finish, the world around her began to shift again. The silver sky darkened. The ground beneath her trembled. The voices around her grew louder, speaking in whispers she could almost understand. A force stronger than anything she had ever felt began to pull her backward. Martha gasped. "Wait, I have more questions. I need more time." Jesus looked at her one last time and whispered, "You will know what to do." Then, darkness. Martha felt herself falling, faster and faster, through nothingness, through time, through space. She screamed. And then, her eyes snapped open. She was back. A changed life. Martha gasped as her eyes flew open. She was back. The bright hospital lights flickered above her, and the steady beeping of a heart monitor filled the room. She blinked rapidly, her chest rising and falling as she struggled to understand what had just happened. Was it real? Had she truly been there? Had she really stood before Jesus? A soft voice broke through her thoughts. "You're awake." Martha turned her head slowly. A nurse stood beside her, smiling warmly. She was a white woman, her kind blue eyes filled with relief. "We thought we lost you," the nurse whispered. "Your heart stopped for almost 3 minutes." 3 minutes. Martha's heart pounded. She had spent what felt like a lifetime beyond this world, seeing things no human had ever seen. Yet only 3 minutes had passed. The nurse adjusted Martha's pillow. "You're lucky. Not many people come back from something like that." Martha swallowed hard. Lucky? No, she wasn't lucky. She was chosen. She was sent back with a mission. But would anyone believe her? Days passed, and Martha was discharged from the hospital. Physically, she was fine, but her soul had changed. She no longer saw the world the same way. She watched people differently now. She saw the hidden pain in their eyes, the invisible walls between them. She remembered the vision Jesus had shown her, the separation, the misunderstanding, the fear. She had spent her whole life believing that the struggle was one-sided, that the world would always see her skin before they saw her heart. But now, she understood. It wasn't about black or white. It was about hearts that had forgotten how to love. And she had to tell them. But how? One evening, Martha sat at her kitchen table, staring at a blank piece of paper. She had tried to write down everything she had seen, everything Jesus had shown her. But the words didn't come. Would anyone listen? Would they think she was crazy? She sighed and rubbed her temples. Maybe this was impossible. Then, the phone rang. She picked it up, her voice weak. "Hello, Martha." The voice on the other end was familiar, strong. "Pastor Daniels." She sat up straight. "Pastor, I heard what happened to you," he said. "People are saying you saw something, that you had an experience with God." Martha swallowed. I did." There was silence for a moment. Then the pastor spoke again. "I want you to come to church on Sunday," he said. "Tell the people what you saw." Martha's breath caught. This was it, her chance. Sunday morning, Martha stood at the front of the crowded church. The congregation was silent, waiting for her to speak. She took a deep breath. Her hands trembled, but her heart burned with purpose. "I died," she said, her voice firm. "And I met Jesus." A hushed murmur swept through the room. Some people leaned in closer. Others crossed their arms, skeptical. Martha continued. "He showed me something that broke my heart." She took a deep breath. "He showed me that we, the people of this world, have been divided for so long, we don't even see it anymore." She scanned the crowd, locking eyes with both black and white faces. "We think racism is about what's on the outside," But it's not, she said. It's about fear, about pain, about wounds that have never healed. A woman in the front row wiped a tear from her eye. Jesus told me that in heaven, we don't have color like we do here, Martha continued. We shine with light. Different shades, but all from the same source. There is no race, no division, only love. Silence filled the room. Some people looked away, uncomfortable. Others stared at her, captivated. Then, a man stood up. I don't know if I believe you, he said. He was white, his arms crossed tightly. But if what you're saying is true, then why is the world the way it is? Martha smiled sadly. Because we let it be. Because we keep seeing with our eyes instead of our hearts. A black woman in the back stood next. Her voice was thick with emotion. I've been hurt by racism my whole life, she said. How am I supposed to just let go? Martha stepped closer. You don't let go of the pain. You transform it. You show love where there is hate. You forgive even when it's hard. The woman's eyes filled with tears. A few more people stood. Then more. And more. Until the whole church was on its feet. Not everyone believed her. Not everyone agreed. But in that moment, hearts began to shift. A conversation had started. And that was enough. That night, Martha sat on her porch, looking up at the sky. She still didn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing for sure. She had been sent back for a reason, and her mission was only beginning. The end. Martha sat on her porch, the warm night air wrapping around her like a comforting embrace. The stars twinkled above, endless and vast, reminding her of what she had seen in the place beyond this world. She had spoken her truth, shared her testimony, and hearts had begun to open. But was it enough? She sighed, rubbing her hands together. She had thought that telling her story would be the hardest part. But the real challenge had just begun. Would people actually change? Would they truly see beyond race, beyond skin, and recognize the souls beneath? A soft breeze whispered through the trees. Martha closed her eyes, letting the wind carry her thoughts. Then she heard footsteps. She turned, startled. A man stood at the edge of her porch, partially hidden in the shadows. For a moment, her heart pounded. But as he stepped into the dim glow of her porch light, she recognized him. It was the white man from church, the one who had doubted her words. His expression was unreadable, but there was something different about him now. He looked troubled, as if he had spent the whole day wrestling with something inside of him. Martha sat up straighter. Can I help you? The man hesitated, then nodded. I don't know why I'm here, he admitted. I can't stop thinking about what you said. Martha remained silent, waiting. He let out a shaky breath. I grew up in a home where we didn't talk about race. My father always said it was best to ignore it, pretend it didn't exist. But that didn't stop me from hearing things, seeing things. He looked away, and maybe believing things I shouldn't have. Martha studied him carefully. His voice was raw, uncertain. I don't want to be that person anymore, he whispered. I want to see people the way Jesus does. But I don't know where to start. Martha's heart swelled. She had prayed that her testimony would reach someone. And maybe this was it. She motioned for him to sit. Start here, she said. Tell me what's in your heart. And for the first time in his life, the man spoke his truth. Over the next few weeks, something incredible happened. Martha's story began to spread. Not just in her town, but across cities, across states. People began sharing her words, questioning their own beliefs, opening conversations that had long been avoided. Some people rejected her story, of course. Some said it was impossible, that she had imagined it all. But others listened. People of all races began reaching out to one another, not with fear, but with love. Not with walls, but with open hands. The change wasn't sudden. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. One day, as Martha walked through the park, she overheard a conversation between two young women, one black, one white. "You heard about that lady who had a near-death experience?" the black woman asked. "Yeah," the white woman nodded. "She said Jesus told her we're all the same in heaven." There was a pause. "You believe her?" A small smile. "I think. I want to." Martha's heart swelled. This was it. This was why she came back. Years passed. Martha grew older, but her fire never dimmed. She spent the rest of her life spreading the truth Jesus had shown her. She spoke in churches, in schools, in homes where old wounds still lingered. And little by little, the world changed. She never claimed to be a prophet. She never demanded that people believe her. She simply told them what she had seen, the truth beyond this world. Some believed, some didn't. But as she lay in bed one final time, much older now, surrounded by the people she loved, she knew one thing for certain. She had fulfilled her purpose. As her eyes fluttered closed for the last time, she felt no fear. Only warmth, only peace, only the light of heaven calling her home. And this time, she wasn't coming back.